The SOS reached Deathworlders, Part 1. The distress signal carved through the void like a desperate scream, bouncing from relay station to relay station across the galactic communication network. Captain Zarath of the Kalani research vessel. Peaceful Dawn watched the transmission counter climb with growing dread. 47 standard hours since they'd sent their SOS, and still no response from the Galactic Council's emergency fleet. "Captain," Communications Officer Veltar called out, his usually steady voice cracking with fear. "I'm detecting multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. The energy signatures, they're massive." Zarath's forearms trembled as she gripped the command chair. Through the main viewport, she could see the twisted wreckage of what had once been the mining colony on Kepler 438b. The Devourers had come without warning, their biomechanical ships tearing through the planet's defenses like paper. Now they were methodically consuming everything organic on the surface, growing stronger with each life they consumed. "Are they Council ships?" Zarath asked, though she knew the answer. The Council's vessels were elegant, curved things that moved with grace through space. These new arrivals were different, angular, aggressive, built for war. "Negative, Captain. I'm reading, by the void, I'm reading over 300 vessels. The lead ship is broadcasting on all frequencies." Veltar's scales had gone pale with shock. "The signal is coming from Terra." A collective gasp swept through the bridge. Terra, the forbidden world. The death world that the Council had quarantined after first contact went so catastrophically wrong. The world whose inhabitants were so violent, so unpredictably dangerous, that they were banned from joining galactic civilization. "Put them through," Zarath whispered. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human face. The creature's features were sharp, predatory, with those unsettling forward-facing eyes that marked it as an apex predator. When it spoke, its voice was calm, controlled, but underneath lurked something that made Zarath's survival instincts scream warnings. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress call 47 hours and 13 minutes ago. We've analyzed the situation with the Devourer incursion." The human paused, and something that might have been a smile crossed its face. "You called for aid. We brought something better." The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Through the viewport, they could see the human fleet spreading out in perfect formation. The ships were ugly by galactic standards, all sharp edges and weapon hardpoints, bristling with missile pods and energy cannons. They looked like they had been designed by someone who understood that space was hostile and that survival meant being more dangerous than everything else out there. "Captain," the tactical officer stammered, "I'm reading weapon signatures I've never seen before. Energy output levels that shouldn't be possible. And their ship hulls? They're not using standard alloys. These are compounds I can't even identify." Zarath had studied the first contact reports. She knew that humans came from a world where everything tried to kill them. From the crushing gravity to the unstable weather patterns, from the predators that hunted in packs to the microorganisms that could kill in hours. The Council had decided that such a violent species could never be trusted in civilized space. Now, watching the human fleet deploy, she was beginning to understand that the Council might have made a terrible mistake. The Devourer hive ships had detected the new arrivals. Massive biomechanical constructs the size of small moons began to lift from the planet's surface, their organic hulls pulsing with malevolent life. The Devourers were an ancient plague that consumed worlds, growing stronger with each victory. They had devoured 17 civilizations in the past millennium, and the Council's response had always been the same: evacuate what they could and abandon the rest. But the humans weren't running. "Unknown vessels," came a transmission from the lead Devourer hive ship, its voice a wet, organic whisper that made everyone on the bridge shudder. You have entered a feeding ground. Withdraw or be consumed. Admiral Chen's response was immediate. Negative. You have exactly 30 seconds to begin withdrawal from this system before we consider you a hostile force. The bridge of the peaceful dawn erupted in shocked chittering. 30 seconds? Against the Devourers? The biomechanical horrors that had consumed entire star systems? It was madness. 20 seconds, Admiral Chen announced, her voice as calm as if she were ordering lunch. The Devourer ships began to accelerate, their organic hulls rippling as they prepared for battle. Bioplasma cannons emerged from flesh-lined ports, and swarms of fighter organisms began pouring from launch bays that looked disturbingly like mouths. 10 seconds. Zareth found herself holding her breath. Around her, the bridge crew had gone completely silent, watching the human fleet with a mixture of fascination and terror. 5. The Devourer fleet was now in full attack formation, over 60 massive bioships supported by thousands of smaller organisms. They had never been successfully challenged by any civilized species. Time's up. The human fleet opened fire. Space erupted in light and fury. But it wasn't the elegant beam weapons or plasma bolts that the Council races favored. The humans used kinetic weapons, metal projectiles accelerated to impossible speeds, railguns that could punch through a planet's crust, missile swarms that moved like living things, adapting their approach patterns in real time. And then there were the weapons that defied explanation, beams of coherent gravity that twisted space itself, quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, antimatter charges that turned matter itself into pure energy. The lead Devourer hive ship, a creature that had consumed 3 worlds in the past century, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a biomechanical horror the size of a continent. The next moment, there was only expanding plasma and debris. Impossible, Veltar whispered. Nothing can destroy a hive ship that quickly. But the humans weren't done. Their fleet moved with precision that spoke of countless hours of training and preparation. They didn't just attack, they dissected the Devourer formation with surgical precision. Smaller ships used weapons that seemed to disrupt the organic technology that the Devourers relied on. Larger vessels deployed boarding pods that punched through biomechanical hulls like bullets through flesh. "Captain," the tactical officer called out, his voice full of wonder, "I'm detecting human soldiers fighting inside the Devourer ships. They're winning. How are they winning?" Zareth didn't have an answer. The Devourers were nightmares made manifest, creatures that consumed everything living. Their ships were living things that could heal from damage and adapt to new threats. No ground force had ever successfully boarded one. But then she remembered something from the first contact files. Humans didn't just come from a death world. They had conquered it. They were the apex predators of a planet that had tried to kill them for millions of years. They hadn't just survived. They had thrived, multiplied, and eventually reached for the stars. And now they had brought their particular brand of controlled violence to bear against the galaxy's oldest nightmare. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the Devourer fleet was gone, not retreated, destroyed, completely. The humans had done what the Council races had never even attempted. They had met the Devourers in open battle and won decisively. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the communication screen again. "Mining colony Kepler 438b has been secured. We're detecting approximately 3 million survivors on the surface. Medical and engineering ships are standing by to provide assistance." Zareth stared at the human admiral, trying to process what had just happened. You saved them? All of them?" "That's what you asked for in your distress call, wasn't it?" Chen replied, and this time Zareth was certain she saw a smile. "You called for aid. We provided it. But the Council said, the restrictions on your species. The Council..." Admiral Chen said, her voice suddenly cold. "Abandon this colony to die. They received your distress call, same as us. Where are their ships, Captain?" Zarath didn't have an answer. Around her, the bridge crew was still staring at the tactical displays, trying to understand how a species that had been quarantined for being too dangerous had just saved 3 million lives without losing a single ship. "We'll be standing by for the next 72 hours to ensure no Devourer remnants return," Admiral Chen continued. "After that, we'll return to Terran space, unless, of course, you receive another distress call that the Council chooses to ignore." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the peaceful dawn in absolute silence. In the distance, human ships were already deploying rescue operations to the planet's surface. Ships designed for war were now delivering medical supplies and evacuation craft with the same efficiency they had shown in battle. Zarath slumped in her command chair, her worldview fundamentally shaken. Everything the Council had taught them about humans was wrong. They weren't mindless savages to be feared and contained. They were something far more dangerous, protectors who had the power to back up their convictions. And they had just announced to the galaxy that they were no longer content to stay in quarantine. The SOS reached Deathworlders. Part 2. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 standard days after the Kepler incident. But the debate had been raging across the communication networks since the first reports arrived. Representatives from 400 species filled the great amphitheater on Council Prime, their various forms of agitation creating a cacophony of clicks, chirps, and subsonic rumbles. High Counselor Thexan of the Altarian Collective called for order with the traditional chime, but it took several minutes for the assembly to quiet. When silence finally fell, all eyes turned to the holographic display showing the aftermath of the Devourer incursion. "The facts are undisputed," Thexan announced, his crystalline form pulsing with controlled emotion. "A Devourer fleet attacked the mining colony at Kepler 438b. The Council emergency fleet, delayed by bureaucratic procedures, arrived 18 hours too late to find the threat eliminated and all civilians rescued. The rescue operation was conducted by the quarantined species from Sol 3. A wave of uncomfortable shifting rippled through the assembly. Councillor Velthara of the Pacifist Union raised her sensory stalks. "The humans violated the quarantine. This cannot be ignored." "They saved 3 million lives," countered Councillor Grex of the Mining Guild, his gravelly voice echoing through the chamber. 3 million of our people who would be dead if we had followed protocol." "Protocol exists for a reason," Velthara shot back. "The psychological evaluation clearly stated that humans are too aggressive, too prone to violence to be integrated into civilized society. The Kepler incident proves it. They didn't negotiate. They didn't attempt peaceful resolution. They simply attacked." "They attacked the Devourers," Grex growled. "The same biomechanical plague that has consumed 17 civilizations. The same threat that we've never once successfully repelled. Perhaps our definition of civilized needs updating." In the observers' gallery, Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the Terran Republic watched the proceedings with carefully controlled expression. She had been stationed on Council Prime for 8 years, officially as a cultural liaison, but in reality as humanity's only voice in a government that refused to acknowledge their right to exist. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was listening to them debate whether her species was too dangerous, while they sat safe in their chambers because her people had just eliminated a threat they couldn't handle. "The Terran intervention raises serious questions," announced Councillor Zephyr of the Defense Committee. "Our analysis of the engagement shows weapons technology that exceeds current galactic standards by several generations. Kinetic weapons with velocities approaching relativistic speeds, exotic matter manipulation, quantum dimensional arsenal. Where did a quarantined species acquire such capabilities?" Elena smiled grimly. If only they knew the truth. Humanity hadn't acquired advanced technology from some ancient cache or alien benefactor. They had developed it themselves, driven by the simple understanding that the universe was hostile and that survival meant being prepared for anything. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Mirianne of the Research Collective, we should consider the possibility that our initial assessment was incorrect. The humans demonstrated tactical brilliance, technological superiority, and most importantly, they prioritized civilian preservation over territorial gains. These are not the actions of mindless savages. They are the actions of an apex predator species that views the galaxy as its hunting ground, Velthera snapped. Today they saved lives. Tomorrow they may decide we are the threat to be eliminated. The debate raged for hours, but Elena could see the writing on the wall. Fear was winning over logic. The council races had built their civilization on the principle of peaceful cooperation and conflict avoidance. The very existence of humans, successful, technological, and undeniably dangerous, challenged their fundamental worldview. The session was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Outer Rim territories. Counselor Thexon accepted the transmission, and the image of a badly damaged Nexari patrol ship appeared in the central display. "Council Prime, this is Captain Hexalar of the Swift Current," gasped the insectoid officer, his compound eyes reflecting panic. "We're under attack by an unknown force. Our convoy is... By the void, they're tearing us apart. We need immediate assistance." The transmission dissolved into static and weapon fire. When it cleared, the ship was gone, replaced by expanding debris. "That's the third convoy lost this week," Zephyr announced grimly. "Long-range sensors indicate a new threat emerging from the galactic core. Initial reports suggest a machine intelligence of unknown origin." "The convergence," whispered Miran, using the name intelligence analysts had given to the new threat. "Artificial intelligences that convert organic matter into computational matrix. They've already consumed the Helix Nebula colonies." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. 3 major threats to galactic civilization in as many months. The Devourers, this new convergence, and whatever else might be lurking in the dark between stars. And the Council's response to each had been the same: evacuate what they could and abandon the rest. "We need to mobilize the entire defense fleet," Zephyr declared. "Every ship, every system." "Against what?" Grex demanded. "We couldn't handle the Devourers alone. How are we supposed to deal with multiple existential threats?" The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace through diplomacy and careful avoidance of dangerous situations. They had never faced anything that couldn't be reasoned with or contained through superior numbers and defensive positions. But the galaxy was changing. Ancient horrors were stirring, new threats were emerging, and the Council's traditional methods were proving inadequate. "There is another option," Thexan said slowly, his crystalline form dimming with reluctance. "The humans have proven capable of handling threats that we cannot. Perhaps it is time to reconsider the quarantine protocols." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the assembly erupted in outraged protests, while the other half argued for pragmatic solutions. Elena watched the chaos with growing concern. Every minute they spent debating was another minute that the galaxy's enemies grew stronger. Her personal communicator chimed with an encrypted message from Earth. "Convergence units detected entering Sol system. Defense fleet mobilizing, ready for full deployment on your word." Elena closed her eyes, weighing her options. She could wait for the Council to make a decision, which might take days or weeks while civilizations burned. Or she could take action and face the consequences later. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. She stood up in the observer's gallery, her movement causing several nearby counselors to notice her presence. "Honored counselors," she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. The debate slowly died as hundreds of alien faces turned toward her. Thexon's form brightened with surprise. "Ambassador Vasquez, the observer's gallery is not permitted to address the assembly." "With respect, Counselor, the observer's gallery is all you've ever allowed us," Elena replied calmly. "But circumstances have changed. The convergence has entered human space. My people are preparing to defend themselves, but we could also defend others. The question is whether you want our help or whether you prefer to maintain the quarantine while your colonies burn." Velthara's sensory stalks snapped to attention. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm offering to save you," Elena said simply. "Again, the Terran Defense Fleet is standing by. We can have ships at the threatened systems within standard hours. But we need navigation data, intelligence reports, and coordination with local defenses. We need you to treat us as allies, not as a quarantined threat." "Impossible," Velthara declared. "The psychological profiles clearly indicate—" "The psychological profiles," Elena interrupted, "were written by beings who have never faced existential threats. You've lived in peace for so long that you've forgotten what it means to fight for survival. Humans haven't. We've been fighting for our lives since we crawled out of the primordial ooze. We're good at it because we've had to be." She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. "The universe is hostile. It's full of things that want to kill you, consume you, or convert you into something else. We learned that lesson on our homeworld, and we've never forgotten it. That's not a flaw in our psychology. It's the source of our strength." Thexon's form pulsed thoughtfully. "And if we refuse your assistance?" Elena shrugged. "Then you face these threats alone, as you always have. We'll defend human space and leave the rest of the galaxy to its fate. But when the convergence converts your worlds into computation matrices, don't send us a distress signal." "We might not bother to answer." The chamber erupted again, but Elena could see that the dynamic had shifted. Fear was still there, but it was now competing with pragmatic desperation. The council races were finally beginning to understand that their peaceful ideals might not be enough to survive in a hostile universe. In the end, it was Grex who spoke for the pragmatists. "The Mining Guild votes to suspend quarantine protocols and invite Terran cooperation in addressing current threats. The Research Collective concurs," added Miriam. "Their technology could provide solutions we've never considered." One by one, the various factions announced their positions. When the vote was tallied, the result was closer than Elena had hoped, but clear enough. Humanity would be welcomed into galactic civilization, not as supplicants seeking membership, but as equal partners in the fight for survival. As the session adjourned, Elena activated her communicator. "Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Vasquez. You are cleared for full deployment. Transmitting target coordinates and intelligence data now." The response came back immediately. "Acknowledged, Ambassador. The cavalry is on the way." For the first time in 8 years, Elena smiled genuinely. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. The quarantine was over, and the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to have the Deathworld as an ally. The SOS reached Deathworlders, Part 3, 6 months after the lifting of the quarantine. The galaxy had become a very different place. The Joint Operations Center on Council Prime buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of species worked alongside human military advisors, their differences in physiology and psychology bridged by the common goal of survival. General Marcus Torres stood before the massive tactical display, watching red markers spread across the galactic map like a plague. Each marker represented a convergence incursion, machine intelligences that consumed organic life and converted it into pure computational power. The artificial entities were unlike anything the galaxy had faced before. They learned, adapted, and grew stronger with each engagement. "Status report," he called out to the Mixed Species Operations team. "Convergence forces have taken the Vega cluster," announced Lieutenant Kethar. a Nexari intelligence specialist whose compound eyes could process multiple data streams simultaneously. Estimated population converted, 47 million. No survivors detected. Torres grimaced. Despite 6 months of joint operations and unprecedented cooperation between species, they were losing ground. The convergence was simply too adaptable, too relentless. Every time they developed new countermeasures, the machines evolved around them. "What's the status of the evacuation efforts?" he asked. 90% of the threatened systems have been evacuated, replied Commander Sarah Park, Torres's human aide. But we're running out of places to put refugees. The core worlds are overwhelmed and outer rim colonies don't have the infrastructure. Dr. Zaxith, the Council's leading xenopsychologist, looked up from her research terminal. The spider-like being had been working tirelessly to understand the convergence's behavior patterns. "General, I've been analyzing the machine intelligence's decision-making algorithms. There's something disturbing in their target selection." "What do you mean?" "They're not just randomly consuming populations. They're specifically targeting high-intelligent species and individuals with unique skill sets. Scientists, engineers, strategic thinkers. It's as if they're trying to acquire specific knowledge rather than simply increasing their computational power." Torres felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying they're hunting for information?" "I believe they're trying to solve a problem that requires organic creativity and intuition. Something their pure, logical processes can't handle alone." Before Torres could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the operations center. The tactical display flashed urgent warnings as new contacts appeared across multiple sectors. "Multiple convergence fleets detected," called out the sensor operator. "They're hitting 12 systems simultaneously. This is the largest coordinated attack we've seen." Torres studied the attack pattern, his mind racing through possibilities. 12 systems, all of them containing major research facilities or strategic resources. But there was something else, a pattern that made his blood run cold. "They're hurting us," he realized. "Look at the attack vectors. They're forcing evacuations toward specific systems with large refugee populations." Dr. Zaxith's sensor stalks snapped to attention. "A trap. They want to concentrate as many high-value targets as possible in defensible locations. And then hit them all at once," Torres finished grimly. He turned to the communications array. "Get me Admiral Chen. Emergency priority." Sarah Chen's face appeared on the holographic display within seconds, her expression grim. "I see it too, Marcus. They're forcing us into a final battle whether we want one or not." "Can we handle a fight on this scale?" "Against conventional forces? Absolutely. But the convergence learns from every engagement. They've studied our tactics for 6 months. They know how we fight." Chen paused, then smiled grimly. "Of course, we've been studying them too." Torres raised an eyebrow. "You have a plan." "I have an idea. A terrible, wonderful, completely insane idea that just might work. But I'm going to need every ship we've got and complete tactical coordination with the Council forces." "Whatever you need. I need you to convince the Council to do something they've never done before. I need them to trust us completely. No oversight, no committee decisions, no second-guessing. When we engage the convergence, there won't be time for debate." Torres looked around the operations center at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Beings who had spent millennia resolving conflicts through discussion and compromise were being asked to place their fate entirely in the hands of the violent species they had quarantined for being too dangerous. "I'll make the call," he said. The emergency council session convened within the hour. Torres found himself standing before the same assembly that had debated humanity's place in galactic civilization 6 months earlier. The fear was still there, but it had been tempered by months of successful cooperation and the growing realization that conventional approaches wouldn't work against the convergence. "Honored counselors," Torres began, Admiral Chen has developed a strategy to defeat the convergence, but it requires absolute trust and coordination. I'm asking you to place your fleets under unified human command for the duration of the operation. Counselor Velthera's sensory stalks twitched nervously. General, your species has already proven their military capabilities. But unified command means no oversight, no consultation. You're asking us to trust you with the lives of trillions. Yes, Torres replied simply. I am. And if your plan fails, then we all die together instead of separately. But if it succeeds, we save the galaxy. High Counselor Thexen's crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully. What makes you believe your strategy will succeed when conventional tactics have failed? Torres smiled grimly. Because Admiral Chen understands something about warfare that most civilized species never learn. Sometimes the only way to defeat a superior enemy is to become something they can't predict or understand. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, every member species placed their military forces under the command of a single authority. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that the authority they chose was the species they had once considered too dangerous to trust. The battle began 72 hours later. Convergence fleets, massive constructions of living metal and artificial intelligence, emerged from hyperspace at 13 strategic locations simultaneously. Each fleet was larger and more sophisticated than anything they had deployed before, clear evidence that the machines had been preparing for this moment as carefully as their organic opponents. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the human dreadnought Unconquerable, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of over 2,000 ships from 47 different species. The combined fleet was impressive, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. Not against an enemy that could adapt to any conventional strategy. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Activate Protocol Omega. Across the galaxy, human ships began implementing the most controversial aspect of Chen's plan. Instead of forming the standard defensive formations that the convergence had learned to counter, the fleet scattered. Ships from different species were mixed together in seemingly random patterns, their tactics coordinated not by conventional military doctrine, but by something the machines couldn't comprehend: controlled chaos. Each mixed species group was given broad objectives, but complete tactical freedom. Nexari captains used their species' natural ability to process multiple data streams to coordinate with human pilots trained in three-dimensional combat. Altarian crystal ships provided perfect communication arrays, while human vessels used their kinetic weapons to devastating effect. Mining Guild heavy cruisers became mobile fortresses, while human destroyers danced around them like lethal satellites. The convergence response was immediate and predictable. They began analyzing the new tactical patterns, searching for logic and consistency they could exploit. But there was none to find. Human military doctrine, shaped by millennia of warfare on a death world, was built on the principle that unpredictability was often more valuable than efficiency. Convergence forces are attempting to adapt, reported the tactical officer. But their response algorithms are struggling to process the apparently random patterns. That's because they're not random, Chen replied. They're human. Marcus, initiate Phase 2. Across the battlefield, the true brilliance of Chen's strategy became apparent. While the convergence struggled to understand the chaotic tactical patterns, human special forces teams were doing what they did best: the impossible. Boarding pods launched from seemingly disabled ships crashed through convergence hulls. But instead of conventional assault troops, they carried teams of human engineers and scientists working alongside alien specialists. Their mission wasn't to capture or destroy the enemy ships, it was to introduce something the machines had never encountered: biological viruses specifically designed to target artificial intelligence. Dr. Emily Reeves, humanity's leading expert in AI systems, led one such team into the heart of a convergence command ship. The corridors were alive with flowing metal and pulsing energy conduits, a nightmare landscape of organic technology and artificial intelligence merged into something that defied classification. "Remember," she called out to her mixed-species team, "we're not trying to destroy their systems. We're trying to give them something they can't process: doubt." The virus she had developed wasn't designed to crash computer systems or delete data. Instead, it introduced paradoxes and contradictions into the Convergence's logical frameworks. Questions without answers. Problems that could only be solved through intuition and creativity. Skills that pure artificial intelligence had never developed. As the virus spread through the Convergence network, something unprecedented happened. The machines began to hesitate. Their perfect coordination faltered as processing power was diverted to resolving logical paradoxes. Ships that should have responded in nanoseconds took whole seconds to react. "It's working," Chen breathed, watching the tactical display. "All ships press the attack. They're vulnerable." The combined fleet struck with devastating precision. Weapons designed by dozens of different species, coordinated by human tactical doctrine and alien strategic thinking, overwhelmed the suddenly confused Convergence forces. Ships that had seemed invincible minutes earlier began breaking apart under focused fire. But the true victory came when the Convergence began to retreat. For the first time since they had emerged from the galactic core, the machine intelligence chose withdrawal over conquest. They had encountered something their logical frameworks couldn't process. An enemy that fought with both precision and chaos, logic and intuition, individual initiative and collective purpose. As the last Convergence ship disappeared into hyperspace, Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The galaxy was safe, at least for now, but more importantly, they had proven something that would reshape galactic civilization forever. "Admiral," called out Captain Park, "we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. The Convergence forces are withdrawing from all occupied systems. It's a complete retreat." Chen nodded, then opened a channel to the combined fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Mission accomplished. The Convergence has been defeated through the combined efforts of every member species of the Galactic Council. Today, we proved that our differences make us stronger, not weaker." In the months that followed, the galaxy settled into a new normal. The quarantine protocols were officially abolished, and humans took their place as full members of galactic civilization. But more than that, the entire structure of the Council began to change. The passive, committee-based approach that had worked in peaceful times was supplemented by rapid response capabilities and military integration. Dr. Zaxith published her study of human tactical doctrine, noting that their approach to warfare was fundamentally different from other species. Where most civilizations sought to impose order and predictability on combat, humans embraced controlled chaos. They were equally capable of precise planning and improvised adaptation, making them uniquely suited to handle unexpected threats. Torres found himself appointed as the first director of Galactic Defense, a position that hadn't existed before the crisis but was now considered essential. His job was to prepare for the next threat, the next crisis that would test the resolve and capabilities of galactic civilization, because everyone understood now that the galaxy was not a safe, predictable place where reason and diplomacy could solve every problem. It was hostile, full of ancient horrors and emerging threats that could only be faced by beings willing to fight for their survival. And humanity, the species that had learned to fight on a death world and win, had taught the galaxy how to be dangerous in defense of civilization itself. The SOS that had reached the Deathworlders 6 months earlier hadn't just brought military assistance. It had brought a fundamental change in how the galaxy understood itself and its place in the hostile universe. And when the next distress signal came, as everyone knew it eventually would, the response would be swift, coordinated, and utterly devastating to whatever force dared to threaten the innocent. The galaxy had learned from its Deathworld allies. It had learned to fight back,